Welcome back, everybody. We are going to do two different videos today. The first one we're going to look at is another weapon system that was sent to me on the Discord. This is, I believe, around the same era of use as the other ones we've been looking at. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. Bandkanon 1, maybe? I'm sure that wasn't right. But anyway, I've seen a picture of this thing. I'm curious to hear kind of what is going on with it. It looks like it would be something that was, say, like a pre-archer system, but the Swedish archer system that we looked at a while back. It looks like it's sort of along the same line. So let's jump into it and let's see what it's about.
The Bandkanon 1 was one of the most revolutionary self-propelled guns, shortly SPG, of its time. Some of its features are still unique compared to its modern counterparts. This SPG, also known as 15.5 cm Beacon 1 or 155 mm One Cannon L50, offered matchless firepower to the Swedish Army over 35 years. Now, we are investigating the Bandkanon 1, the 155 mm autocannon on the tracks. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel before we start and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. To be notified of our new videos, please click the bell button. Also, you can now click the join button to support our channel.
That older guy right there kept doing a double take. He kept he would say something and then look back and say something and then look back, just go back and forth and back and forth.
The Bandkanon 1 was one of the world's heaviest and most powerful SPG in its time. However, surprisingly, its innovative features did not attract other countries. Even Sweden produced only 26 pieces of them. Three main facts that shaped the Bandkanon 1 were Sweden's neutrality policy, geography, and small population. Yes, this country was neutral, but it was also pro-Western. Moscow was uncomfortable with the situation. It was likely that the USSR would attempt to invade Sweden in a possible Third World War to secure its Baltic front. Besides, NATO was a threat to some degree too. It might want to use Sweden's strategically important territory to attack the USSR's Baltic coasts. If Stockholm stayed neutral, in a moment of desperation that a possible Third World War might bring, NATO could attempt to invade this country. So, Sweden had to make great efforts to keep neutral during the First Cold War years. Thankfully, Stockholm had...
I highly doubt that NATO would go invade Sweden in order to have a jumping off point for the Soviet Union. If you look at NATO doctrine during this time period, they're almost entirely focused with the connection by land between the Soviet Union and the rest of Western Europe. It's what they are, all of their weapon specs, all of their reconnaissance stuff. It's all where it could be used in that tight land area between Western Europe and the Soviet Union. I don't know what would have to happen for Sweden or for any of the Baltic countries to be just open, for it to be openly considered for an invasion. But it certainly, at least in my belief, wouldn't be the first move. Something would have to happen in that direction, like a potential Soviet invasion or something like that would draw NATO specifically to the Scandinavian countries. Because if not, most of their stuff is further south. Most of their thought process and doctrine and everything is centered around mainland Europe.
always given importance to its independent national defense industry, which eased to handle this challenge. Sweden also had a limited population for a large territory. The Swedish armed forces could not count on numerical superiority. But Sweden also had its own advantages. Thanks to its high quality education system, this country had skillful conscripts and innovative engineers. By the 1950s, the Swedish army's artillery was outdated. Sweden would use its advantages to solve this problem.
I've asked this on or talked about it on a different video comment section, but what actually is the reasoning for that? What are the reasons behind it? The education system seems like an easy thing to point at and be like, yeah, we have a good education system. What's actually like some reasons behind why the I don't know why the forward tech, why the high level engineering, like when did that start? Because normally countries don't just get that. Even modern countries, it's not something that you just like you have one day. You decide you're going to have a big or a great defense industry, and then boom, like it's there. Normally, it takes a long time to build up that sort of competence, I would say, in sectors like that. And so, where do y'all think that comes from with Sweden, particularly?
In those years, Sweden was working on the tank called Emil, but the program was terminated in 1954. So, AB Landswerk developed a new SPG called Artillery Kanonwagen 151, consisting of the Emil's hull and a turret with a 155mm autocannon. The Swedish army did not choose it. Still, it had been highly impressed with the concept. So, AB Landswerk and Bofors began to develop a new SPG called Bandkanon 1 in the late 1950s. The first prototype was ready for trials in 1960. The Swedish army was pleased with the results of the extensive tests and gave the serial production order in 1965. The first production vehicle was completed 1 year later. Initially, Sweden had planned to have 70 SPGs. However, only 27 Bandkanon 1s, including the prototype, were ever produced. The Bandkanon 1 was an SPG, not a self-propelled howitzer. A howitzer can fire the shell within both low and high barrel elevations,
Yep.
so it can act as a mortar. But the maximum elevation angle of the Bandkanon 1's barrel was smaller than 45 degrees. The Swedish army had covered its numerical disadvantage with technology. The Bandkanon 1 could send 14 rounds to target in 48 seconds, whereas the other Western 155mm self-propelled artillery, such as M44 or M109, had a rate of fire of only 4 rounds per minute in the burst mode. It means the Swedish SPG offered the same firepower as 4 US self-propelled howitzers. Well, if it's all about the rate of fire, why didn't Sweden choose to develop a multi-barrel rocket launcher system, shortly MLRS? The answer is actually simple.
I'll see what
The
he says.
MLRS of that time were still primitive compared to today. For example, the latest 122mm BM-21 of the USSR, introduced in 1963, had a range of only just over 20 kilometers. The Bandkanon 1 could send a 155mm projectile, which contained more explosives, to 25.6 kilometers. Also, in those years, flight characteristics of the artillery shells were still better than the artillery rockets, which improved the accuracy. The Swedish army deployed.
Yeah, the artillery rockets, rocket technology in general doesn't come along until later in the Cold War. It kind of sucks in the early Cold War period. And so if you're looking at something that is dependent on rocket tech in the earlier Cold War years, chances are it's not going to be able to keep up with its contemporary counterparts that aren't using rockets. There's a ton of time and money being put into rocket tech throughout this time period, but it takes a while for them to get to a point where they're actually on par with other weapon systems of the time.
Deployed the Bandkanon 1s to the northern region, where the possible full-scale land invasion was expected. The USSR could invade Sweden by amphibious assault or airborne operation in the other areas. The towed artillery was enough to encounter such threats. The crew of the Bandkanon 1 was 5 persons. The SPG was 11 meters long, 3.37 meters wide and 3.25 meters high. The combat weight was 52 tons. The Bandkanon 1
I'm not used to seeing what looks like an actual gun on the back of anything. Like, look at the back of that thing. It literally looks like a firearm on the back. Like, it looks like you literally have a firearm like placed down into or onto a chassis.
had one 240 brake horsepower Rolls-Royce K60 multi-fuel engine and one 300 shaft horsepower Boeing Model 502 10MA gas turbine. Its maximum road speed was 28 kilometers per hour. The range of the vehicle was 230 kilometers. The Bandkanon 1 could negotiate 0.95 meter vertical steps, 2 meter trenches, and 4 to a depth of 1 meter. The range of the 155mm 50 caliber gun was 25,600 meters. The rate of fire was 14 rounds per 48 seconds. The elevation of the gun was between -3 to +40 degrees. The barrel could be
That's what I was just about to ask is how much movement. I couldn't remember if he said it earlier in the video, but how much movement does the gun have for the actual, the actual gun itself?
traversed 15 degrees on both sides. The Bandkanon 1 carried 14 ammunitions. The hull and the turret of the Bandkanon 1 were made of all-welded steel. The thickness of the hull was between 10 to 15 millimeters, while the thickness of the turret was 20 millimeters. The side of the magazine was 20 millimeters, covers 10 millimeters, and the bottom 15 millimeters. The Bandkanon 1 had no combat capability in the NBC environment. The Bandkanon 1 had many components of the STRV-103 tank, including the suspension, power pack, and transmission. But the hull was longer and had one extra road wheel. Like the STRV-103, the Bandkanon 1 also had a combined diesel and gas engine configuration similar to a warship. In a standard mission, the diesel engine was always used, whereas the gas turbine was engaged when driving off-road. Using the power pack of the 39.7-ton STRV-103 caused some shortcomings. The Bandkanon 1 was 52 tons, so the speed and range of the SPG were low. Still, the hydropneumatic suspensions provided good cross-country ability to the Bandkanon 1. The driver could lock the hydropneumatic suspensions in position during firing to provide a more stable platform. The 155mm gun had a pepper pot muzzle brake and a replaceable liner which weighed 1,340 kilograms.
I was wondering about that. If you made the suspension to basically give, I was wondering how that would work when you were actually firing the gun. There are some truly hilarious videos of weapon systems being shot and test fired and stuff. Not just during this era, although there are some good ones from this era, but also from the more modern era where a gun is shot and everything around it just goes haywire, or it totally it's supposed to be dug into the ground and it will totally come loose and start bouncing around everywhere. But that's not the case here. It can lock in place, is what he said, whenever the gun is going to be fired.
When the vehicle was on the move, a lock at the front of the hull held the barrel. The elevated mechanism was counterbalanced by a spring balancing gear mounted in the pivot of the cradle, and it was operated either manually or by an auxiliary electric motor. This electric motor limited the elevation depression angles between +2 to +38 degrees. However, the manual mechanism allowed between -3 to +40 degrees. When the barrel was in minus angles, the turret could be turned to right only 4 degrees. A magazine which contained 7 drop compartments holding 2 rounds each fed the gun. The rounds dropped from the magazine onto the loading tray, suspended the rollers beneath it. The run out of the gun and the movement of the loading tray cocked the springs. Then these springs operated the loading tray and the rammer. The first round was manually loaded, after which the loading was automatic. The gunner could select either single shots or fully automatic. This automatic feeding system increased the rate of fire. By the time the first round hit the target, the other 13 were in the air. So, a single Bandkanon 1 could cause a devastating effect on the enemy. But the automatic feeding system also interrupted sustained fire. For the second salvo, the Bandkanon 1 needed reloading. It was why the rate of fire of the SPG was 14 rounds in 48 seconds. In one instance, in which one shell was inside the gun while 14 others waited in the magazine, the Bandkanon 1 fired 15 rounds in 45 seconds. It was the official world record for a 155mm SPG, which has not been broken yet. Still, only 2 minutes was enough to reload another 14 rounds. When the ammunition ran out, the crew elevated the gun to plus 38 degrees and opened the two covers on top of the magazine. The integrated articulated ammunition haulier loaded with a new ammunition clip was loaded into the magazine. Then the
that's freaking awesome.
crew closed the covers and the Bandkanon 1 became ready to fire again. So, the Bandkanon 1 could send 28 projectiles in about 3.5 minutes to target. However, the M109 could fire a maximum of 6 rounds at the same period. The integrated haulier offered another advantage. After Bandkanon 1 completed a full salvo, it could move toward another firing position that had previously left spare ammunition. This way, the SPG could continue its mission without the need for a resupply vehicle while avoiding counter-battery fires. Initially, Sweden had planned to use atomic rounds with the Bandkanon 1. In those years, the only available 155mm nuclear artillery shell was the US W-48. But Washington refused to provide these 0.072 kiloton rounds. Later, Sweden also considered developing a 155mm chemical munition for the Bandkanon, but abandoned this plan later. In 1988, Sweden modernized the Bandkanon 1s and replaced their 240 brake horsepower Rolls-Royce K60 multi-fuel engines with the 290 horsepower Detroit diesel 6V53T engines.
So there's a sort of thought process with this time period specifically that if somebody uses nukes, even small ones, even, like what was considered to be used on in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis, those small tactical land nukes. The thought process is if that happens, it's over anyway. That nuclear war has already broken out, like it's already on, and so while I could see countries wanting chemical weapons or nuclear weapons or whatever they would want, I mean, really, if the Soviets came in and used a nuke, it really anywhere, it's not just in Sweden, if that were to be used anywhere, nuclear war is already going. Like it's and so at that point, if I'm Sweden, I'm just trying to get out of the way. Cuz like I don't want anything to do with that. Let these two animals next to me throw rockets at each other, and I'll get my head down and try to get out of the way.
Besides, the SPG had now a new automatic transmission developed and produced by Bofors Defense. This new power pack replacement had also been applied to the STRV-103.
I freaking love that thing. The STRV-103, love it. It's probably one of my favorite things that we've looked at.
The Swedish Army renamed the original production variant as Bandkanon 1A, while the modernized vehicles were designated as Bandkanon 1C. In 1993, the C models were also equipped with the modular azimuth positioning system and a new fire control system called HUYAR. Because of these changes, the combat weight of the Bandkanon 1C increased to 53 tons. Despite all these updates, the Bandkanon 1 was an outdated artillery system. It had too low of a range and speed. The more capable howitzer had already ended the era of field guns. The modern 155mm 52 caliber guns could reach a firing range of 40 kilometers. And Sweden was no longer under the threat of a possible Soviet invasion. Also, the Swedish Army had already begun to work on the self-propelled variant of the FH-77. This program would pave the way for the development of the Archer. So, Sweden retired the Bandkanon 1 in 2003. Yet, its retirement did not cause it to be erased from memories and hearts. This SPG, which holds an unbroken world record, is still beautiful and fascinating. The Bandkanon 1, a Swedish steel beast with a terrifying, fiery breath, will always be a beloved legend. Thanks for watching our video, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up if you liked our video. To be notified of our new videos, please click the bell button. Also, you can now click the join button to support.
I love their videos, the weapon detective videos. And also, imagine being somebody that's riding around on one of those things. You're literally riding around on just a giant gun. Seriously, just a giant gun. That would be that would be kind of awesome. Okay, so that was oh, what were the abbreviations they used for it? BKN, or it was BKN1, or it's something along those lines. Anyway, their self-propelled gun that was massive and shot super fast. The next video that I'm going to do today is over the Doolittle raid. It is the U.S. response, initial response to Pearl Harbor in World War II. So the response is obviously against the Japanese, and it is in retaliation for Pearl Harbor. So the Doolittle raid is the other video I'm going to cover. But yeah, both of these should be out pretty close to each other. So I'll see you guys next time.